The lady never even had a passport. So
and we've got aircraft coming in out of West Africa, people dying, vomiting. They land at NYC, JFK, and they say, no problem. They don't have it without a test. I think it's safe to say, Wayne, that clearly they're covering up how many cases are in Africa and here.
I think so, because this is why they bring a guy like Klein on board, because he's going to put pressure on the corporate media to keep it quiet. You know, anytime we see something like this happens, it's just like 9/11, by the way. Remember, they told people, well, you didn't see what you saw. Sorry, you had your facts wrong. And, you know, I was just, as a matter of fact, last month I was in New York speaking at 9/11 the commemorative function. And there's some new photographs that were released of that. And they were telling even reporters on the scene, oh, you must have been mistaken. It's the same thing. It's how the government deals with catastrophes.
Eddie?
Yes.
Absolutely. Eddie, thank you so much for the call from New York. We're going to come back and go to Daniel, listening on WBCR 1470 in Knoxville, Lona, Charlie, and Sean, and many others. Wayne Madsen is our guest. Wide open phones, 800-259-9231. Infowars.com is the tip of the spear. The experts are to the bottom of the hour. We'll talk some about his book before he leaves us, The Star and the Sword. Well, they want to lock a bunch of people up and put us in their pretty pens once an epidemic turns into a pandemic in this country. And I always go back to this because for me, it's what really hits home. That if you watch the news and read the newspaper for 25 years like I've done, 20 years on air, but if you're like 60, 70 years old, you've been doing it for 40, 50 years, how do you not know that some shadow government, COG, that Eisenhower warned about, isn't in control? And then the documents all come out in the church hearings in the 70s and confirm it all. They just know the public is ignorant of all these facts, so they play this game going, oh, he's a conspiracy theory, or he's crazy. Thousands of different tests, hundreds of them lethal. In some cases, one of those hundreds of lethal secret programs would kill thousands of people, sterilize hundreds of thousands, kill millions. HIV, clearly cooked up by the Navy and the Army. Clearly, they had declassified programs for autoimmune viruses to reduce population. You got Bill Gates running around and the Rockefellers talking about it constantly. These outbreaks keep happening in Africa. When the average liberal trendy goes, well, there are too many people. But then they'll tell you you're a racist if you don't support government-run health care. I mean, it's like crazy that the big secret religion is population reduction. And then people say, well, Africa's population still went up. Must not be doing too good, killing everybody. Some African countries, 45% of the people have HIV. Tens upon tens of millions have died. And now Ebola's popping up that we know our governments were souping up. South African, European countries, Israeli, U.S., I mean, I played a BBC News clip earlier about it. It's on Infowars.com, that they weaponized Ebola. They had Ebola that was airborne in 1989 on the East Coast that got out. Of course they're making this stuff. And then we go, hey, the groups that make this stuff, maybe they're behind it. Kind of like maybe the government's behind the anthrax attack. Turns out it was U.S. government anthrax. Then they had a whole bunch of patsies they tried to blame. I want to go to your phone calls. Wayne Madsen's our guest. But Wayne, finishing up on this subject, again, former NSA officer, whistleblower, talking to your sources, where do they think, and where do you think this Ebola thing is going? I mean, you pretty much came out and said that you think it's a false flag and where it originated, and what's their bottom line here? Because politically, it's hurting them not to respond. But more and more, they know he's a lame duck, so they don't care. They've got pardons. They can resuscitate him in the media later, like they've done the Clintons and the Bushes and others. What's the grand plan here?
Well, my fear is that, you know, we've had Hollywood doing a lot of predictive programming on this. The latest one is this latest Planet of the Apes movie, where most of the human population is wiped out by something called simian flu. We know that Ebola is transmitted also from non-human primates, monkeys, chimpanzees, and gorillas. So my fear is what they're doing is they want to set up the first regime in the United States where they're going to have mandatory quarantine regions They're going to have mandatory checks. They're going to do highway checks and get people used to what happens to them every day at the airport is going to happen on interstate highways and other major roads. And where will they set up the checkpoints? Wherever they darn well please. You can imagine that way stations and toll stops are just made to order for this type of thing. But I think that's where we're going. They want to condition the American people to be able to do internal travel prohibitions and at the very least travel checks.
And Bill Clinton wrote back in 1998, we cover it in my 2000 film, Police State 2000. I mean, we show the statements, the executive orders about in the future they would have hardened internal checkpoints at the state level, searching everyone, and a culture where you've got to give blood to get a driver's license and all this stuff. That's only begun the last 2 years in places like D.C. on a trial basis. Whatever they plan, they end up getting it, even if it's late. And you can see them, Wayne, as you just said, rolling this out. It follows where the border's open, but they have internal checkpoints at the airports, and illegals can fly, but citizens can't without being searched. And illegals can have bank accounts with no ID, but citizens have to. They're setting the precedent under this globalist model where you have internal checkpoints, but no longer national borders. It's completely upside down, but that is what they're doing.
And and that's my fear, and that's why I think we have Northcom involved with this these Ebola SWAT teams. Late Friday, Obama did something very interesting. I'd say it's late. I'm glad he did it. He issued an executive order at like 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon when most of the media is not paying attention, basically saying there will be no more research, government-sponsored research on these coronaviruses. That doesn't include Ebola, but it includes things like SARS, MERS, and influenza, avian flu, swine flu, the 1918 Spanish flu, which government scientists brought back to life after getting DNA from a dead Inuit girl who died of it in 1918.
That killed like 100 million people worldwide, and they dug it up.
Obama said all that research is to cease and desist immediately, and any future research has to be pre-approved by the government, and he put no time limit on it. I just wonder what happened when he started looking at things like Ebola, how this thing started. Did he actually find the government's own fingerprints on this? And he said, well, I can't stop research on Ebola because it's a clear and present danger, but all this other stuff, like what's been going on at the University of Wisconsin in Madison on resurrecting the 1918 flu by recombining DNA from dead viruses to current viruses.
That's insane.
He stopped all that. I hope it stays stopped, but a lot of people in the medical community applauded him for that. But I just wonder what triggered, because we know he doesn't do this unless, he's pressured. He doesn't take these initiatives on his own. I'd be very interested to be a fly on the wall inside one of those Ron Klein meetings to hear what prompted this action.
Well, as I've always pointed out, the 36 level 4 bioweapons facilities under BioShield are the clear and present danger, because they've got some of them in level 2 facilities with level 4 pathogens on the coastline in Galveston, a city that gets wiped out every decade. I mean, it just got wiped out 6 years ago, and it wrecked the facility. I mean, here's an example. Lionfish in the 80s, when a hurricane hit Miami, something like 14 of them that were in a tank got out, and now the entire Caribbean and Atlantic are just full of them because they breed so fast, killing everything. It's an invasive species, poisonous, and it's all because they had no natural predators in this area. Well, I mean, that's a fish, folks. Imagine all these facilities with zoological crossing it. It is a recipe for disaster. Let's go to your calls. Let's talk to Daniel in Tennessee, listening on 1470 WBCR. Daniel, you're on the air.
Thank you very much. I'm watching the clock. I'll be to the point. First of all, I call him Alibaba because he's a prince of thieves and liars. Anyway, you asked at the beginning of the program on your opener there, Alex, that what do you think is the next step? I really believe, and I speak professionally, I really believe that his next step is going to wait until after the November selection. Then he'll declare martial law and appoint himself president for life. I do not underestimate this devil. Thank you for listening.
Well, thanks for holding to say that. We're going to skip this network break because this is so important. I want to go to everybody. You know, it wouldn't help the establishment to keep him in because politically he is worthless right now. People are exiting his events en masse. Reuters reports Obama makes rare campaign trail appearance. People leave early, but they do so many crazy wild cards now. Obama could be the false flag. They could assassinate him or try to and blame it on a libertarian or patriot group to create a race war or civil war. Or they could wound him, and then he would declare he was, you know, a dictator during the emergency transition. Who knows? Wayne, what's your take on that?
Well, you know, although I think we are suffering in this country from a plutocracy. We don't get a lot of choice for president. D.C. also, they don't want to keep the same people around. They get tired of, you know, his magic has worn off. And now we're talking about, you know, in 2016, well, it's Hillary Clinton or maybe Jeb Bush. Here we go again. Bush